Okay, I think most people have found their seats or are finding their seats. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Those of you who made the trek in person, welcome. And those of you who are attending on Zoom, welcome also. I think as we all are increasingly recognizing, attention is a very valuable commodity in today's world, and we don't take yours for granted and really appreciate you being here. My name is Scott Allen, curator of paintings here at the Getty and the curator of the present iteration of the Gustav Caillebotte Painting Men show, which opened just last night and to the general public today, so we're very excited about that. Joining me here on stage, to my right, Gloria Groom from the Art Institute of Chicago. Who will be opening the show in Chicago in late June. The dates are up there on the screen. And on my other side, Paul Perrin from the Musée d'Orsay, who had an absolutely fantastic run of the show in Paris. 580,000 people saw the show there, which is, I'm told, a big number even for Musée d'Orsay. I was there a couple times and it was completely crazy, the crowds, and you had some really great programming too. So I think there was a lot of excitement and energy and interest in the show in Paris, and I hope some of that spills over here in Los Angeles. I feel that people are excited and interested in this artist who is still not maybe as well known as some of his impressionist peers. What we'd like to do tonight is do a little bit of behind-the-scenes conversation, talk a little bit about the development of the show and things that we've learned, challenges that we've encountered, and some sort of takeaways for us, hopefully keeping it pretty casual. I think just for some initial context, I wanted to talk a little bit about the sort of Caillebotte historiography, because it's quite different and distinct from the Impressionist cohort he was part of, in part because of his extraordinary wealth, which really differentiated him from the group. He was a true amateur in the sense that he did not need to make a living from his painting. He took it with the same degree of professional seriousness as the other artists, but he did not need to interface, engage with the market, seek out dealer support and that kind of thing during his lifetime. And whereas artists like Monet and Renoir, definitely did. And as a consequence, during his lifetime, his work did not circulate very widely. He gave paintings to friends and so forth. But a large majority of his work was still in his possession at his death. And he did not have a dealer posthumously after his death actively promoting his work or on both sides of the Atlantic, which is what happened with other artists who had dealers like Durand or Well promoting their work. And all this Caillebotte work, it goes to his brother Marshall, and then through Marshall's family line by descent. And it's only in the 1950s, after the Second World War, that some work starts bubbling up into the market. Wildenstein, the dealer, played a very active role in starting to kind of create a market for Caillebotte's work. Some scholarship starts happening in the 1950s. An important French scholar, Marie Béraud, starts doing work on Caillebotte. And interest in America starts to grow as well. And it's only really, and I'm just speaking about the US right now, it's only really in the 1970s that we have a first important museum show of Caillebotte's work in 1976, 77 in Brooklyn and Houston. Here's just a photo of the catalog here, a project that Kirk Varnedoe, the legendary MoMA curator, did early in his career. It was a very kind of visionary choice of subject for a monographic exhibition at the time. And as it happens, actually, I should mention that the Varnedoe papers are here at the Getty Research Institute, and I feel like that's kind of a whole other focus exhibition, because all of his research papers and research photographs that he took are all there, and it's fascinating material. Jump forward to the mid-1980s, 1986, one of the great Impressionist blockbusters of the 1980s, the new painting, Impressionism, 1874 to 1886. And this was a sort of a kind of a year-by-year accounting of the Impressionist group exhibitions with individual essays on each exhibition, and a really rich and deep checklist that was, grounded in those historical exhibitions. And it was the first time in an Impressionist group exhibition that Caillebotte, I think, had a really big showing, and everybody just kind of, their jaws dropped, and they're like, oh wow, this is a serious guy, and he can hold his own. So this was important in terms of the canonical status of Caillebotte. And then jump forward to the mid-1990s, a project that Gloria was crucial in.
Yes, this was one of the exhibitions I started early on in my career, a long time ago. And I'm just laughing because this catalog cover, they've taken out the woman. It's like prescient. It's like, what? I never really noticed that. That's so weird. But anyway, there it is. It was an exhibition that the Art Institute did with the Musée d'Orsay. It was at the Grand Palais. How many of you saw it? Did any of you see it? You're all too young. Oh, good. Okay, good. I've got my peeps. At the time, it was really a discovery exhibition because we had the big one. And so we've always thought we know Caillebotte because since 1964, this painting has been at the Art Institute, so we've kind of all grown up with it. But we were surprised that the French were rediscovering, or discovering really, their native son as a great artist. And it was just such a revelatory exhibition. It was a retrospective, so it was every part of his career. And I think it was probably, besides the Kirk Varnedoe exhibition, which was so wonderful, which I didn't see, I think it was the beginning of Caillebotte's recognition as a really serious artist that needs to enter the canon, who's been left out of the Rewaldian circle. Right?
Yeah, no, I think absolutely. And I mean, what you notice in the late 1990s in the wake of this show, a lot of academic art history starts really turning their attention to Caillebotte. So I think this exhibition was really, I think, generative in terms of the field. And then since the 2000s...
Yeah, and just first I want to apologize for my English tonight, because I think my brain is still on Paris time, where it's 4 a.m. So I'm trying.
Don't say that. Don't think that.
I'm trying to do my best.
It'll make you crazy.
So that's a good image to see the enthusiasm for and curiosity for Caillebotte since the late 90s. All these projects have happened in various places, in like Switzerland, Germany, Canada, Japan, also France, of course, and Spain. And they all kind of tried to look deeper in some aspects of the work of Caillebotte. There was a really great exhibition in Frankfurt about like the relationship between his painting and photography. There was this great also exhibition about his sort of garden and flower paintings and like his career as a painter and as a sort of gardener. There was also this important exhibition about comparing his work with the photographs of his brother, because his younger brother Martial was a photographer and made some photographs that was inspired by Gustave's paintings and not the way around. And so, since 20 years, there had been a lot of new way of seeing Caillebotte's art and making him more, probably more famous also to the general audience.
Yeah, and I think in tandem with all of this exhibition activity, I think we all have sort of observed also the market for Caillebotte's paintings really kind of burgeoning and flourishing, and kind of a growth of a larger secondary market through auctions and things, and increasing interest among museums and private collectors in acquiring Caillebotte's work. And I think in the case of this exhibition, the real germ of the project were actually two different acquisitions. And I think, as curators, we love it when a project begins with an acquisition. There's a lot of institutional focus and excitement around the new work, and galvanizing the forces that you need to galvanize to get a big exhibition project up and running is easier when there's that fresh excitement around the new work in the collection. And so in Paris,
yeah, that's really the beginning of this project. The acquisition of the Boating Party painting by the Musée d'Orsay 3 years ago now. So, which is probably one of the most important recent acquisition made by the Musée d'Orsay. It has really changed the physiognomy of our Impressionist collection, and it also has really changed the way we are looking at caillebotte, especially in France and in Paris, where we have the Floor Scrapers, which is a very famous iconic work, but not really an Impressionist painting in the most common sense. And so this painting was clearly showing us another side of caillebotte's art and career. So this painting was bought 3 years ago through the system of what we call the national treasures in France. So it's a way to block the exportation of some important works that the Ministry of Culture and thinks that should stay in France. So this painting was going out of France, and it was decided that this painting should be blocked because it was very important for the French collection and for France. This is not something we do a lot to block this work like that. So we really reserve this type of process to very, very important painting. And we did it for this one. Also, because as Gloria mentioned, and Scott too, there's a lot of important caillebotte paintings that went out of France since 50 years. And so there's probably sort of, France is a bit late, maybe, kind of, to acknowledge the importance of caillebotte and has recognized this importance after the United States. And I think also that's what we wanted to do with acquiring this painting. And when we made this acquisition, so it was made possible through the sponsorship of LVMH, because it was a very expensive acquisition. And so the idea of our director of the Musée d'Orsay at that time, who was Christophe Le Ribot, was to really celebrate this acquisition by an important exhibition. Especially as there has not been really a very important caillebotte exhibition in Paris since '95. So it was really the time to show caillebotte again in Paris, and for the first time at the Musée d'Orsay, because the last time was at the Grand Palais. And the idea of the exhibition, the theme of the exhibition, the subject came from that painting, because when you just look at this painting, what is in the middle of the painting is a man, a very modern man, doing the boating activity. He's very modern also in the fashion, the way he is dressed, with this very nice top hat, with the beautiful shirt also, the striped shirt. And everything is about modernity in this painting, but also a very masculine side of modernity. And also there's so many mysteries also in this painting. We still don't know who the man is there. We don't know why he has kept his top hat on his head. Which is, I mean, for us now, it's like, why not? But probably for the 19th century, it was very weird to see someone like this doing this sort of boating Sunday activities wearing this outfit. We don't know at what he's looking at. We don't know who is in front of him, looking at him. Obviously, it's a painter, but maybe it's something else. So there's a lot of mysteries, and that was the impetus for this exhibition. It's the center of his inspiration, is recording what it is to be a modern man, but it's also his approach to the subject is very innovative and has still some mysteries in it.
And on the Getty side, I think really just a few months before the Musée d'Orsay made that wonderful acquisition, the Getty was very fortunate to acquire at auction in New York this painting, from quite early in Caillebott's career, Young Man at His Window, a picture that had been in the 1994-95 show, and so seen in Chicago and Paris and also Los Angeles for the third venue of that show. But I think was sort of sold right around the time of that exhibition. It went into a private collection in Texas, and it wasn't really seen in public until that auction in late 2021. And at that time, we had a small little 19th century highlight show, and we immediately slapped this up on the wall, and people were immediately taking selfies in front of it, because it's one of these pictures that, because there's this large-scale figure seen from behind, standing at a window, an open window, it's a picture very much that positions the viewer, and that is about that active vision, and makes that active vision incredibly sort of dynamic and riveting with this kind of wonderful spatial construction and all of these converging diagonals. It's a very sort of dramatic and tension-filled spatial construction for what is a picture of a guy just standing with his hands in the pockets, like the epitome of idleness, but it somehow is just filled with this kind of energy and tension. And like you were saying with the boating party, there's this sense of mystery and intrigue and of like narrative possibility. It's not a simple anecdotal genre picture where you piece together the narrative and this is the sort of the caption for the painting. It's more open-ended than that. I think because in some ways it's this act of looking, and there's so much that he gives us in that opening out on the window, but there's also these blockages with this heavy balustrade and these intervening apartment buildings that it opens out, but it's also confining and kind of claustrophobic. And so the spatial dynamics of this picture, I think people are really fascinated by, and the pose, because he's facing kind of into the picture, viewers, I think, naturally sort of want to adopt that pose in front of the painting. And so on social media, you immediately started seeing all the pictures coming up. So I think as this sort of powerful image, we were very excited to have this painting come to the Getty. Obviously, our first Caillebott painting here, an artist that was definitely kind of on our watch list, I think, over many years. And this one was one that we sort of had in mind in the back of our heads. It's the cover image of the Catalogue Raisonné. It's one of these classic Caillebotts that is in a lot of the standard art historical literature. I remember as an undergrad reading Robert Herbert's famous book on Impressionism, and he's got sort of a full-page illustration of this picture. So it kind of sticks in the memory, this painting. And for the Getty...
Are you going to tell them what we did? Are you going to tell them what we did? All three of us?
Oh, well, I'm getting to that.
Okay.
I'm getting to that.
Okay, I'm excited. Okay.
There's also going to be a whole lecture that I'm giving, deep dive into this painting, so I don't want to give everything away tonight. But yes, okay, so to get to the subject of the painting beyond what I've said, this is Caillebott's younger brother, René. He's standing at a third-story window in the family mansion in the 8e arrondissement in Paris. The building still stands today. This room and adjacent rooms are now like lawyers' offices. And yeah, no, we were walking around the neighborhood, and a lady was smoking outside the door, and we said, "You work here?" And she led us into the inner courtyard, and we found the directory, and Paul called up, and this very nice lawyer let us in. He let us stand at the window and take photos at the window. So we have stood at that window. In the photograph of me at that window, Gloria's arm is sneaking into the frame because she's holding the kind of the window open. But come back later in April, early May, I'll show you all of these photographs. So a big deal for us, this exhibition, and it just actually was the first Impressionist painting to come to the Getty that actually was shown in an Impressionist exhibition. So we're like, this is crazy. We have an whole Impressionist gallery and not one painting that was shown in one of the major Impressionist exhibitions. So this is the first. So I think when Paul originally floated the proposal for this show, we agreed immediately, and we liked that it had a thematic focus. It obviously resonated with this picture as well. And because an important show had happened in the US just in 2015, which was a more general retrospective at the Kimball Museum in Fort Worth and the National Gallery of Art in Washington, we felt like to justify a show in the US, it needed to have some sort of thematic perspective, but still be broad enough that you could tell the story of the artist's career through really major and compelling works. So that's where we were coming from at the Getty, and then of course,
Yeah.
we know
Well,
why
then-
Chicago came on board.
Well, no, because they wrote and said, we're doing this exhibition, can we borrow this painting? And I'm like, oh, really? We are now the third venue, okay. And so that's how it happened. So this is a painting that, as I said, we've all grown up with at the top of the stairs, that we built the wall that it's on for this painting. And I've never seen it look better than in this exhibition. I never thought about putting it on deep burgundy walls, but somehow it warms it up. This is a painting that has always been rather cool. We've treated it recently. In 2015, we cleaned it, and it had a gray sky. Somebody had decided that it needed to be rainier than it was because it's Paris Street rainy day. And so what we uncovered was all of this yellow, this wonderful sort of sun breaking through after a rainstorm. And when people haven't had time to even think about putting their umbrellas down because second before they were being drenched. And I think it just takes on a whole different meaning. It's really amazing. So I'm very pleased that it was seen again in Paris, where it had been in 1995, and also I'm really happy that the West Coast is getting another look at this. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, we're so grateful to have that painting
You
here,
should be.
and all the wonderful things from the
There are a
Musée
lot of
d'Orsay
Chicago
too.
people who are very unhappy right now.
Well, I think we're glad that you see it in a new way now, so that's good.
I see it, but a lot of people aren't seeing it.
Okay, next topic. So, I mean, when we started, really, now we had our partnership in place, and it's not always possible with every exhibition, but ideally what you want to do is kind of get your scholarly team together and actually meet and discuss, to go through the checklist together and say, okay, well, what is this the catalog going to do? What are the essays? What are sort of our broad arguments? Many exhibition catalogs, they sometimes have a slightly random assortment of different scholarly essays that have been solicited. It can be sometimes a little ad hoc and random, but we really wanted there to be a kind of a structure and coherence to the approach. And we wanted also there to be a lot of voices in this catalog. And so we talked a lot about which scholars, both in the US and the UK and in France and elsewhere, that we wanted to include. And we kind of came up with a sort of basic approach where we really wanted to emphasize the really kind of complicated and multifaceted nature of Caillebott's personality and his pursuits and his identity as a man in late 19th century France. And we thought, okay, well, what are these different facets? And sort of like, okay, well, the family relations are clearly important. So Caillebott as a son of a very imposing bourgeois patriarch, Caillebott as a brother in a family of brothers, Caillebott as a committed bachelor in the end, Caillebott as someone with really formative military experience, so kind of Caillebott as soldier, Caillebott as a very privileged and wealthy amateur. And this is a very important and complicated category, and sociological category in late 19th century France. It has kind of negative connotations in English. It's like, oh, you're not a good artist. You're a hobbyist. You don't devote that much time to it. It's just a weekend thing. But there's a kind of a culture of amateurism, which is really flourishing in the late 19th century in an interesting way. So there's those facets of his personality. Caillebott as a very devoted sportsman in a very modern mode, and this is something that Paul tackles in his essay. Caillebott as a Parisian, as an urbanite who lived in very specific neighborhoods in Paris and really restricted his art to those neighborhoods in a very topographically specific way. And so part of our interest in this show is getting a more detailed understanding of the sort of the social geography of Caillebott's kind of Parisian world and, where his friends were living and so forth. And there are, what other facets of Caillebotte? What am I missing? It was sort of the Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy approach. It's like we wanted to sort of like have these different kind of identities and emphasize those and present a complicated and multifaceted personality at a moment when, I think identity and also all the cultural politics around it can be so reducing and reductive. And what we didn't want was for a show about masculinity to be sort of like, oh, this is a show about, it's toxic masculinity, we can't talk about it. And it's like, well, what if we have a more kind of nuanced and ambiguous approach to this subject, which is, somewhat contentious.
It's all.
No, go ahead.
What you are saying is like all these sort of sides of Caillebotte personality, and but in the end, it's really how this explanation can help us to look at the painting better and to see them better, and it's really about Caillebotte as a son, as a brother, as an amateur, as etc. But mainly as a painter, and that's why also the title of the exhibition is Painting Men, and not just like looking at men or representing men, but we really wanted to emphasize also this idea of painting as an act, as a choice, as like Caillebotte is choosing to paint these different men, and is choosing to paint them this way. And all these choices are very important, very singular also in its time. And that's what we wanted to emphasize. His singularity is not like any other artist. He's very singular, we will come back to that, but among the Impressionist group and more broadly. Another other thing I wanted to say is how this idea of addressing the question of masculinity, if we want to use the 19th century words, it would be more virility, which is more at stake in this at the time, is also a way, to acknowledge what has been done in the history of art by a lot of scholars, especially in the field of gender studies, since the 90s. And so it's not such a new subject in a way. It's new to make a whole exhibition devoted to that theme, but the field is not new at all. And we wanted to pay tribute also to all the people who have like led the way to this new thinking. And also to say that it's about understanding more what were the condition, like the condition masculine in a way, masculine condition in the 19th century. But it's more broadly to understand the relationship also between men and women, and the studies of like the scholarship now about masculinity, virility, history of like what this word meant is also following and is a sort of development of the history of women and like feminist studies in a way. And it's not the opposite, it's like a complementary approach. And that's, I think, what is important also, and what we wanted to say with this exhibition is there has been a lot of exhibition about women artists and how to really like deconstruct also the male gaze and the male gaze on women. But I think we also need to do the same, and there's a male gaze on men. There's also a female gaze on men, of course. But and this gaze is to be deconstructed the same way if we want to have the full scope of what was 19th century art and relationship between men and women.
You're not that tired.
We're done here.
You're not tired at all.
I'm back.
No, that was great. I mean, but I think to be fair, Paul, I mean, even as sort of basic and self-evident as our title, Painting Men, is, we did not arrive at it quickly or easily. No. And I mean, Gloria, do you want to say a little bit about some of the conversations around that?
Painful. Because, we really what we wanted to do was put fraternity in it, fraternité, because it is about males bonding, fraternity, brotherhoods. But fraternity is, Animal House, and we can't say it in English. It just doesn't sound good, and we couldn't. So it's a new type of, it's the Republican male after the disaster of the Franco-Prussian War and Commune, and we tried to get that point across where, he's really embracing a new kind of masculinity that in this period of the 1860s, 70s, early 80s, and so we went all over the place. And yes, so it's painting men. As you notice, there are women in the exhibition. He's not only that, but a great percentage of his figure paintings, and he's a great figure painter, are of men. And that is so unusual in the Impressionist circles. Even Degas would not paint nearly as many men. And he's the only other artist that really takes on the male gaze of looking at men. So it's, but it was, how many?
It was a challenge, and I
Yeah,
think,
we had
the
24
other word
different
that, I think
titles.
on Paul's original PowerPoint, you remember, it was
Yeah.
something about modern masculinity, and
Yeah.
that is very much the focus of this exhibition. But
But we
you know,
couldn't use masculinity because that,
masculinity is,
it's
people
it's
immediately,
loaded.
it's loaded, and people
in
sort
a
of,
different way.
the word toxic comes to mind
Yeah.
voluntarily or
Yeah.
involuntarily.
Yeah.
But also there are simple sort of like graphic considerations. You think about street banners, and the name Caillebotte, in the United States, first of all, people might see it and not know how to say it or pronounce it. It's a mouthful. It's a lot of letters. And if you have the word masculinity as part of a subtitle after Gustave Caillebotte, it just ends up being a letter salad on the banner. And so you do need something like short and basic as a counterpoint, just from a graphic point of view, let alone kind of a punchy sort of the verbal point of view. So that's part of the conversation too. And in the end, it's sort of something very literal and direct in painting men, which kind of speaks to that portrait scenario, that direct encounter with the male body right up there in the picture plane. There is something blunt and direct and facing about these Caillebotte paintings that, those male bodies are there to be reckoned with, and the viewer has to kind of negotiate that relationship. So,
But I think it's really interesting when you say that, because it sounds anonymous, painting men, but one thing this exhibition did was to put names to these men. And so instead of just man at the window, he has a name, and he has a place, and he has an address in Paris, and that was, and you can see the last part of the catalog is the appendix, and I think it's a huge contribution. And thank Megan True, who's out here in the audience, and Scott, because they really dug in and found the identities of these anonymous men. So it's painting men, but we know who they are. But that doesn't put on a banner either.
And I think, it's important to be honest too about we love the works that we have in the show, and we're obviously extremely grateful to have them from all our many lenders. But there's always works that you're trying to hunt down and trying to secure on loan, and because publication schedules do not align with exhibition schedules, you sometimes are putting things in a catalog that you haven't secured the loan of it yet, but you're doing research and you're writing biographies on some of these sitters, and you're hoping against hope that you're going to get the loan, and it doesn't come through. And so I thought it'd be nice to sort of flag a couple pictures that we would have loved to have included. And
Painfully nice.
Okay, we'll be quick about it. Do you want to talk about one of these, Gloria?
Well, I just love this little man who's just, enveloped by the fabrics that the wallpaper. It's Laura Ashley gone on steroids, and this man. And Scott has identified this man. He comes from Ecuador. He was a merchant, and he probably met Caillebotte at the Hôtel Drouot buying art. But and we don't really know where this takes place, but it could be the family home, because it also had pattern on pattern in this kind of Second Empire frenzy of color. But I just think it's so wonderful, because he looks so helpless and vulnerable. And usually you see women in the helpless, vulnerable stage, and so he's looking at this man, and he's just sort of, I would have loved to have had Monsieur Rare, we think it is, on the walls, but whatever.
Yeah, and there's the Gardeners also, which is a very interesting painting, an early painting by Caillebotte. And we also would have loved to have it in the show. It would have been quite complementary also with the floor scrapers and with this approach of work and the work ethic also in Caillebott's art, and also the ambiguities of him painting workers, because he's not, as you know, he's not only they are not only workers, they are working for him, they are working for his family. And what you see is the estate, and like for the floor scrapers, what you see is probably the artist's studio, future studio. So there's always this type of ambiguities in the way he's situating himself with these figures, the way he's looking at them, the way he's kind of ennobli, I don't know how to say, like giving them like nobility by painting them on a full-scale work. But at the same time, they are also a mark of his kind of higher status. And what does he say about his own position as an artist and as a bourgeois also at that time? So it's saying this also.
And I mean, the last picture on this slide is a portrait of a man named Pierre Rabot. This is a painting, like these other two paintings have been on the kind of auction market, relatively recently, but this third one hasn't been seen, I think, in many years. And Pierre Rabot was very important in the very last years of Caillebott's life. He was a neighbor at Petit-Gennevilliers, where Caillebott was living. He was a fellow yachtsman. He considerably younger. I think he was sort of around 28 years old when Caillebott painted this, when he was 44 or something. And so I think there might have been also a bit of a kind of a mentor-mentee relationship in the world of yachting and sailing. And this portrait is the only glimpse we have of Caillebott's studio at Petit-Gennevilliers. So it's kind of it's quite an intimate context to present this friend of his, and it was Rabot, along with somebody else, who were the chief witnesses on Caillebott's death certificate. So we wish we knew a little bit more about their relationship, but there are two portraits of Rabot by Caillebott, one more of a close-up, a bust-length one, and it's just very compelling. He looks a lot like Jude Law. Which if I don't know how clear the image is. And his body has a strange kind of sway that reminds me of like an international Gothic sculpture. The sway of the body for some reason. It's a very compelling picture. And we in the latter portion of the show, I think we really wanted to have a couple strong portraits to help kind of counterbalance, some of the strong earlier portraits we have in the show, and this was definitely one we were seeking out. But
we have his biography in the book because we thought
and
we
Monsieur
might get
Rare,
it. So
and,
yes, all of
exactly. So there's at least some new information
there.
about him. No, thank you for saying that, Gloria. And then I think maybe we can talk very briefly about, now that we've sort of gone through the process of doing the catalog and we're in the midstream of the show now, maybe reflecting a tiny bit on some sort of insights and revelations for us, as the project has come together. So, Paul, maybe you want to talk about this.
These paintings are sort of the subject of my essay in the catalog, and because I wanted to work more on the boating party and try to put this painting in context. And so here you can see how the boating party belongs to a group of works that have been done at the same time, around 1877, 8. But it's also kind of different in the group. And I think it's also one of the greatest group of works he had done in his entire career. It's also, if you have seen the exhibition, I think the gallery with these works in the exhibition is stunning. And he's probably at the peak of his inventivity, even kind of provocation in the way he's trying so many different angles and points of view, and you can really see how he tries to, from one painting to the other, to change the way he looks at the subject, to change the perspective, to change the angle, the framing, and that's how dedicated he was to inventing a new way of looking and a new way of painting. And I think this is really obvious here, how he was dedicated to this idea of modernity and of painting something new and the idea of a real novelty. And the other thing is, when I first worked on this painting, I was at first like, okay, this is a beautiful, pretty, boating picture, like all these impressionist paintings by Renoir and Monet about leisure. But in fact, when you look closer and longer at this group of works, you see that it's much more complex and ambiguous again. Especially like, it's about sport, but it's not really competition. They are not like on the Seine River, they are like on the Yare River, which is a very small river along what is the summer estate of the Caillebotte family. So it's at the same time very modern, but also very intimate. Like it's probably his friend, his family. So there's always a sense of like, and Gloria said kind of show and said the same with the urban scene. It looks very modern. It looks like a public space. It looks like the space really of modernity, but it's very, very personal to him. Some kind of like prolongation of his intimate world, and the way he, like the outer space, the public space, is kind of integrated in his world. And I think, yes, this painting really shows its full scopes of ideas.
No, that's great, and I think, on the theme of what he's doing artistically and how he's being innovative artistically, gender is playing into that too, because painting, there are gendered codes, there are different genres that have different associations, and Caillebotte is active in a very competitive avant-garde environment. He's displaying with these artist friends of his, and they're speaking to each other, their works are in dialogue, they're responding to each other, and one of the ways that Caillebotte differentiates himself is by sort of flipping the gender script on some pictures. And one thing that has really been driven home to me, it's like, on one level, yes, I mean, the works really illuminate his social world and his life, and it's very easy to get into the sort of biographical reading, and that can get you quite far, but you do have to remind yourself that these are paintings, these are artistic constructions, and he's being very thoughtful and strategic in what he's choosing to paint and how he's choosing to paint them. And so just to kind of drive the point home, I know, Gloria, you love this piano. I mean, that's a Chicago Renoir, and you love the Caillebotte.
I do. Well, and to remember that he's painting also to be seen. So these are going to be exhibited. He may not need to sell them, but he wants to play the game with the big guys, with his impressionist colleagues. And I just love this comparison because they're almost exactly the same time. I think there's a year difference. And Caillebotte is not doing the usual woman at the piano, what they call this art des agréments, these kind of womanly arts of sewing, playing the piano. These are the things women do best. That's what they're trained for. But instead, he's showing his brother, who is an emerging composer who will become quite known. And it's just the difference between the woman who's kind of sexy, she's showing a little bit of her skin underneath the transparent peignoir. It's all about beauty and womanly, this is what women do. And his is, again, he's surrounded by pattern on pattern, he's not like Monsieur Ray, he's not completely engulfed in it, but he's just there very seriously looking at a sheet of music. She doesn't really look at her music because it doesn't matter because she's not really playing. He's really playing, and you can see his fingers reflected in this, ebony grand piano, and it's all about this serious art of playing the piano with a male. And I just like when he turns the tables on that, and he does it again and again, and he does it, obviously. He knows what he's doing. He knows that most people are painting women at pianos, and his friend Renoir is one of his best friends. And so I love this comparison too, because he shows his friend Paul Hugo, this sort of dandy about town, and Renoir, who has to please because Renoir needs to make money. How do you make money? Well, you don't show a man with a cane. You show a woman wearing the latest profile. So you have the bustle, which is all what fashion is about, the silhouette. It's not just the frontal, it's the silhouette. And you make her as pleasing as possible because she's selling herself to sell the painting that you need to sell. So, did that?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I mean, you've got the quintessential Parisienne, and then he's like, well, I'll do the Parisienne.
Yeah, I'm doing the guy.
the male, because he's very much a dandy, too.
Yeah, he's a
like he's very fashionable, and so it's sort of the fashionable male equivalent.
Yeah.
I think what is very interesting also here is that at that time it was, I mean, the woman costume was considered beautiful and valuable to paint because there's many details, many ribbons and colors and buttons and things, but everyone was agreed to say that male costumes were ugly and boring and it was not really a subject of painting because there's nothing to paint. Like they're all dressing the same, they're all black, they're all... And I like the way that Caillebotte is like monumentalizing this anonymous guy, kind of, because it's a full-length portrait, but he's not somebody very important. And the real subject is the way he's dressed. He's a fashion and the male fashion, and he's showing that male fashion is not just like plain black boring costume. There's many details, and you can see that like the cane is quite strange. He has the newspaper in his gilet. There is the watch. There is the silk foulard, I don't know the name in English, scarf. And even I really like the way that he's kind of opening the jacket to see the interior motif inside the jacket to show how sophisticated it was also for men to dress at the time, and that there's many differences between men, and these differences are like when you spot them, you can see what is the status of that man, if it's a lower class man, if it's a bourgeois, if it's a high bourgeoisie, if it's a dandy. And I really like the way he's paying attention to these details and showing that a male costume can be as modern and as an incarnation of what is modernity as a woman dress.
Can you think of any other life-size male portraits at the time where I can't either, standing life-size like that?
I think maybe just
sort of
Manet.
like Madame X,
maybe
you know?
Manet.
Maybe,
but
yeah, but not. This is different.
But it's rare.
It is rare. I think it's, yeah.
I mean, and then I think this is a fun sequence to go down, these sort of comparisons. And I mean, there's something wonderfully like innovative about Caillebotte, but actually in the 1870s, there is actually a whole slew of pictures of bateaux coupés, of cut boat paintings. And, you know, James Tissot is not an impressionist, but he's kind of in the circle and knows Degas well. And this is a kind of picture that Caillebotte surely would have known. It's, you know, a number of years earlier, but, you know, Tissot is painting this kind of thing for very commercial, for a, you know, male collector, the sort of heteronormative male collector out there, for clearly a picture for the male gaze, who's got this pretty woman seated in the boat awaiting her, you know, the viewer / paramour who will come and paddle her around on the water. And as Paul was describing the Musée d'Orsay picture earlier, he's going to put the muscular guy at the oars and position the viewer as the passenger in this boat. But it's the flipping of the roles and the subject and saying, okay, let's confront the male gaze with a male body in this way that is, just by making that switch, quite provocative and kind of unsettles the viewer and makes it uncertain how we're supposed to, you know, how do we relate to this? Who is the primary intended viewer of this picture? What is the sexuality of that viewer? All of these questions kind of open up, and the picture doesn't resolve them for you. And we kind of have left to grapple with them today, whereas something like the Tissot is completely within the norm for the time, a decorative woman as an object of display, and with an erotic charge in the viewing scenario.
And I think it's not only to say that Caillebotte is trying to say that in front of this man is a woman. This is not the point, but it can be. So it also allows women to look at the painting and identify with the viewer and be in a position of like feeling that they are the viewer of the scene and not just like having to put their eyes in the gaze of a man. And at the same time, it's also Caillebotte saying that I'm comfortable enough to be okay to occupy this position and to paint the man that is in front of me. And I'm not trying to create a sort of fake scenario where I'm on the other side and I'm going to paint the woman which is like waiting on the other side of the boat. And so he's really like, he's a realist painter. So he cannot do the boating and the painting at the same time. So he is looking at that man because that's a subject, of course, of modernity, and is like kind of, assuming this position of being a man, looking at a man and painting this man in front of him. And there's maybe not subversive or ambiguity in this painting, but even that is something very kind of new at that time.
Yeah, and I mean, the point of comparisons like these two are just to really emphasize that, Caillebotte knows what he's doing. He knows what genres he's intervening in and how he's twisting it. And I think he enjoyed being provocative this way. I know we should get to the Q&A soon, so I'm going to just whip through these. I think, urban labor is a theme in art in the 1870s, and someone like Degas is pursuing this theme, and all these pictures of little dancers that he does are pictures of workers in a way, and this is a theme for Caillebotte, and he's giving us house painters. And I just love this because the drawing of the house painter of the ladder that we have in the show here, it reminds me of like nothing more than Degas' famous Miss Lala, like up there, or like a pirouetting dancer. And I mean, the pose similarities are obvious here, and it's kind of his response to Degas in a way. I'm pretty convinced that he's thinking about things like this. And then, of course, Degas, as radical as he is, it's one female nude bather after another in the 1880s, and Caillebotte does this one big, definitive male nude with a similar kind of setting, with the bathtub and, kind of a spare interior with no kind of narrative pretext, mythological, historical, what have you. And just to give us a very powerful realist statement of the male nude in a way that was, completely surprising and radical at the time. And just other artists were not doing this. And I think it's a special moment in the exhibition, and certainly in Paris and here and in Chicago. I think it will be the final exclamation point in your itinerary.
So to speak. It is very, that's the thing about Caillebotte, that he's narrative in some ways, but he's, after you just look at them and then you just see there's so much else going on. And in this painting, it's very sensuous. I mean, it's beautifully painted. There's no buttocks that are quite so wonderful as those, but you don't see them very often in males because usually it's academics, and this is just a male, just toweling off, and it still shocks when you see it. It's so unexpected. And then you have this lavender pinky palette, which even adds to it that it's, okay, but it has these sort of feminine colors to this male buttock. So anyway, I find it just extremely interesting, and I think Caillebotte must have known exactly the reaction he was going to get.
And this is a painting I've looked at a lot recently in Paris, and I've looked at it with many people who I was guiding and explaining the exhibition with, and I learned a lot about this painting. I think at first when I approached these works, I had also in mind all the scholarship about like question of genders and questions of homoeroticism, etc., which is still very important and valuable. But I discovered so many more things when you look at it. For example, I'm really intrigued by where are we in this painting? Whose bathroom is it? And and if you kind of look at it more closely, you see the bathtub. And having a bathtub at that time was not common at all. It was like a luxury. And because having a bathtub means you have to remplir, how do you say remplir? You have to fill it up. So how do you fill a bathtub? This is a lot of water. So either you have a man, like a porteur d'eau, like someone who's like climbing water and to fill it, so it's very costly. Otherwise, you have like running water, or how do you say?
Faucet.
Yeah, which is also very new at that time. It's only the rich people in Paris can have this type of thing. So it also tells us many things about always the condition of Caillebotte himself. This is his status, his access to hygiene, which is very, very new and very modern concept at that time. And I think the way this painting is also speaking about like cleanliness, about hygiene, about being have a clean body, and especially for a man who was a sportsman, and this idea of the discipline of the body also. There's a bath, but it's not like being like in the bath, enjoying hot water and thing. It's just about having a clean body at that time. And I think this also, it tells all these stories, and in the end, the man who you see here, we don't know who he is, we don't know who the model is, but it doesn't matter, because in a way it's Caillebotte himself who is talking about his own experience of modern life, of being a modern man, and saying my experience of modernity can be the subject of a full-length painting. And even the most intimate moment of my life can be the subject of a modern work of art. And I think this is very striking in this painting. You're too kind.
I think now that we're sort of just a minute or two away from 8 o'clock, we should maybe have some questions. It's maybe a good moment for that. I think there will be a microphone being passed around. If you want to raise your hand, someone will bring a mic down. Yeah, just.
There's so much more we could talk about. We have more images, but we'll just, he's fascinating artist.
Sure.
That's okay. I think we don't have time. It's fine.
Many, many moons ago, I did my thesis on Rodin's Tower of Labor, so I had some familiarity.
Can you talk into there?
Many, many moons ago, I did my thesis on Rodin's Tower of Labor. So I have some familiarity with the Third Republic. So I was quite intrigued by you using the word that he was a Republican man. Can you characterize what that means to you?
Well, it doesn't mean what it means today.
Well, that's why I prefaced it with that statement, because I knew it didn't. That's
No, c'est la République, it said, so he's born in 48, so that's still the Second Empire, his family, and then he lives, he's in the Franco, he's in Paris, and he's a man who lives by the ideals of the ideal Republican, which is liberty, equality, fraternity. That's what I meant. It has nothing to do with...
Oh, I knew that, but
okay.
I was just, yeah.
Okay, and I think he really shows that, even in showing a worker, an urban worker, even if it's working for him, he's still taking on a subject that shows his empathy and his association with those who work. He is a working artist.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you so much for a fantastic meeting. This was absolutely amazing. and you represent three completely different history, a story. And I was just fascinated to understand that even the title of the exhibition means so much. The way you were describing your choices, how to call the exhibition, because it will go back, it will go in history. The focus that you would put on the title will represent the exhibition a lot. And the fact that you've chosen Painting Man is just set the whole tone for the exhibition, and that was ingenious. Thank you, actually.
Thank you. One other thing about the title, which we forgot to mention, is like we needed to find a title that worked well in both languages, in English and French. And Paul assured me that this worked very well in French. And so we're like, oh, finally, one that works.
And I must recognize that you found the title. You were the one to find the
That's
title
true.
in English.
No, you did.
First in
Although
English.
it's prettier in French, because it has more of a poetic, it's peindre les hommes, you know, to paint men.
But
It's
I
a
really
little-
like also the I think it's very English, like the sort of painting man, like two words to say such a complicated reality, but it seems like so direct and so frank, but at the same time there's beneath this so many ways of understanding what it is to paint men. I really like this sort of, because it's like the painting of Caillebotte, they seem so direct and obvious, but then when you look closer, it's not at all. It's not as obvious as it seems.
How do you say it in French again?
I'm sorry?
How do you say the title in French?
It's Peindre les hommes.
There'll be a test afterwards.
My question, I want to ask a question. My question is about the history of putting this particular exhibition together. What was difficult? What was step by step? The history of making it. How long did it take?
Well, I think we really started in earnest in the beginning of 2023. And I mean, a huge amount of the effort goes into getting the loans, for the show. I mean, that's where a huge amount of the work goes, I think, just tracking things down. And because, there are still things with family heirs, there are things in museums kind of around the world, and with many other private collectors, and you have to kind of go through the auction houses or dealers that and try to find a way to those collectors, and some are kind of willing to engage, some are not. Your auction house contacts really go to bat for you, but they also have client relationships that they have to maintain, and so they're not going to be necessarily so aggressive as to jeopardize those relationships. And so it's very important for us to cultivate really good ties with our colleagues in the art market world, and so it ends up being this kind of complicated network of individuals who sort of pull it all together. And then, of course, natural disaster happens 1 week before the first shipments of art are supposed to come from Paris to Los Angeles with these wildfires, and that obviously nothing that we were, expecting. And this was sort of a terrifying moment where we really felt like the fate of the show here in California was in real jeopardy. And I have to credit our leadership here at the Getty, both in the museum and trust-wide. Our president and CEO, Katie Fleming, was doing a 2-hour Zoom with family heirs on one weekend just to kind of explain better the situation here and the conditions at the Getty Center. And so there was a whole effort to reassure lenders that the Getty Center was safe, and we have these kind of protocols in place and wildfire prevention measures on site, and we kept the show on schedule and on time. And so that's like a kind of a small miracle to me that that happened. And so there are these kind of challenges which are just, sort of heart attack inducing, where like at that final moment where it's like, are we going to have to cancel the shipments? Are we going to have to try to find a way to postpone 2 months? And it was tough. It was tough. And so I think we're extremely grateful to both of our partners and to all of our lenders for, continuing to be willing to sort of participate and support the show here at the Getty. So I think all of us, who have enjoyed the show or who will enjoy the show here, I think we need to acknowledge all of that support and the trust that's been put into the Getty as an institution. So I'm very grateful for that.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask what is in plain English inclusion exclusion. For example, we have all these paintings of the boats, of the boatman. I don't know how prolific he was. Are these all the paintings that exist more or less, or there is many, many paintings and you chose? So if he was prolific, you can tell us a little bit about it. And then what are the ones that almost made it to the show but decided not to include them? Or besides the 2 ones that you showed us that you wanted to include and they were not available? If you can tell us a little bit about these things.
You want to talk to that?
I can do the first part and then
Okay, yeah, sure.
I think Paul, the total oeuvre of Caillebotte is 500-something
It's
paintings.
not very, yeah, it's not very much.
It's several hundred paintings. His career is relatively short. He really emerges as an artist in the early to mid 1870s, and then he kind of continues until his death in 1894. So it's sort of 2-decade career, and he has many other serious pursuits besides painting. Like he spends a lot of time racing sailboats, designing sailboats, being a horticulturist, building a world-class stamp collection. He takes all these activities to this kind of supreme level of achievement and excellence, and I was very intense and driven guy. And what he created in painting it's astonishing, like the scale and ambition and the extent of some of these works. So I think we have 90 or so paintings and drawings by Caillebotte in the Getty Show. It's a little bit bigger in Paris. I think it'll be a little bit bigger in Chicago. But it's still like, I think because we're focusing on the figure paintings and drawings, it is a good representative selection. Of course, there are some things we didn't get, but we've got a lot of his major works all together here. And I don't know if either of you want to say anything about things that we're missing, but
Maybe one more question?
Hello. I have a comment and then a question. This comment is for Gloria. Gloria, I lived out here for many years, but I am from Chicago. My first trip to the Art Institute was in the 4th grade. I've been to the Art Institute many times, and I just want to compliment you on the way the paintings are displayed in the Art Institute in your department.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Here.
That's a beautiful comment. I
And that's,
appreciate it.
I was just at the Art Institute, and I love going there. I've been there maybe my whole life, and it's just a delightful visit. That's my comment. Now, this is my question. I'm a school docent here at the Getty. Tomorrow, I have the pleasure of taking a 12th grade AP art history class around. How do you suggest I discuss this exhibit with them?
Well, I think, you'll be introducing this artist to these students, probably many of them or most of them for the first time. And so, this show, I think actually, the arrangement is somewhat chronological and thematic, a little bit of both. And the accent, if you read the section text, there's a kind of a biographical narrative there. And the way that I'm thinking about framing it for people is when you think about classic impressionist pictures, you think of pictures of, Degas' pictures of dancers and laundresses, or you think of Renoir's that fancy lady in the loge at the opera. You often think of these female subjects by these artists like Degas, Renoir, or, you know, a number of years ago we had this Manet and Modern Beauty show, which we did with Chicago here at the Getty, and that show was largely about the fashionable Parisienne, kind of an iconic subject for modern art that Manet really kind of delves into. And so that was, this show is in some ways a counterpoint to that Manet show. And Caillebotte, you could say, like in that context of the Impressionist group, he's really unique and distinct in this emphasis on men. Let's learn more about Caillebotte, his social world, his life, and learn how to appreciate how innovative he is, not just in the choice of some of these subjects as a painter of modern life, who has certain realist ambitions to kind of portray his world, but also how he like rivets attention in innovative ways on these subjects, and how he, you know, frames them and, you know, composes the subject, how he engages the viewer. I think, you know, the way that these pictures address the viewer, position the viewer in very specific ways, get them to look at the paintings and think about how, like, what's the relationship of the viewer to this painting? Because Caillebotte is setting up that kind of relationship. And I think the reason we respond so strongly to the work, and the reason why it's so fun to install a Caillebotte exhibition, is because of these strong figures and the way that you can make them speak to each other across the space, along a wall, the way you can really activate a space and make a space dynamic. Like the sight lines you can create with these guys looking at each other and looking away from you, and is like, think about how dynamic they are in visual terms. And yeah, I just think all what I said, I think hopefully that works. Good luck. Good luck.
I think on that note, we should,
Okay.
that's about as good as it's going to get.
I
So,
think, yeah, we're at 8:10 now. I'm sure people want to get home. Thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you.